Welcome to Abiding Hysteria, the monthly podcast where women and gender diverse people tell their healthcare stories. I'm your host, Rachael Woodard. For info about my healthcare journey and why I decided to do this podcast, check out our episode 0. If you'd like to know about upcoming episodes and more, follow us on social media at Abiding Hysteria. If you'd like early access to uncut episodes with bonus content, become a patron for only $5 a month at patreon.com/abidinghysteria. And don't forget to rate, review, and leave a comment so others can find us as well. It helps others find this show so that we can build a community of women and gender diverse people who don't feel so alone in their healthcare struggles and who can affect positive changes against gender bias in the medical field worldwide. As a reminder, this show is informational only and not a substitute for individual medical advice. Today's episode features Ashley Bell, who is running for U.S. House in North Carolina's 10th Congressional District and who has a long-time background in both healthcare and education, as well as her own story in dealing with chronic illness. We talk about all this along with the future of healthcare in this month's episode of Abiding Hysteria. Hi, everybody. Rachael Woodard here, your host. And today with us, we have Ashley Bell. Ashley, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am, like you said, I'm Ashley Bell. I am running for the 10th district for the U.S. House seat for our district of Congress. And I'm a physician associate. I've been a physician associate for 14 years. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So could you tell us a little bit about what is going on in terms of the healthcare field right now in the state of North Carolina, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, healthcare in general, wherever you're at, it's kind of a mess from top to bottom. And, it kind of makes it harder when you have legislation that's being passed through the state house that is actively seeking to prosecute healthcare providers. There was a bill that was vetoed, and then the veto was overturned that will allow people to prosecute healthcare providers for providing gender-affirming hormone therapy. And really, regardless of the treatment, the idea that a healthcare provider could be prosecuted for providing basic healthcare of any kind is just asinine. I mean, we see this in other states with, abortion and things like that, but now it's kind of knocking on our door. And so that kind of makes it, even more difficult to be a healthcare provider, as if it wasn't difficult already. And of course, we have issues with access and issues with corporate overreach in healthcare. So, those are things that we fight against daily.
Thank you for that insight into what's going on right now. So what brought you into the healthcare field to begin with?
I had just always been interested in science and healthcare, and I never really thought that I would be able to do it. I just didn't think I really had the aptitude. I was actually a public school band director, and
Awesome.
and I was working, my last semester at college, I was working at MD Anderson in Houston, and I met a PA, and I had no idea what a PA was. I'd never heard of one before. And so I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. Let me look at what it takes to be a PA. And so I look up all the requirements to get into PA school, and I'm like, well, this is my last semester at college. I'm definitely not doing that right now. So I got out, taught for a couple of years, but it was kind of always just in the back of my mind. And I just finally decided that, I need to make the leap, or I'm not going to be able to get this out of my head. So I went back to school, did all the prerequisites, took 2 years. It was basically another degree, and got into Wake Forest. And that's how I ended up in North Carolina. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what is your personal experience with chronic illness? I know you had mentioned that a little bit in your platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So me personally, I started having just kind of weird symptoms. This was probably, 3 or 4 years ago. Neurologic symptoms, like I would just get dizzy out of nowhere and, just not even know which way was up or down. And started having really odd migraines. And, when you're all of a sudden hit with these attacks where you literally, you have no sense of balance, no sense of direction, and you're just kind of like holding on to something in the room to make sure that you're not like going to fall over. Those kinds of things you probably shouldn't drive with. Probably shouldn't be, operating a motor vehicle when those things happen. And so at the time, I was working at an institution that really did not support any kind of remote work. They were vehemently against remote work. They actually never even went remote during COVID.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but, I then had this issue where I was having these attacks, and there were times that I literally could not drive into work. So my immediate supervisor supported me working from home on those days, but the university refused to allow these very reasonable disability accommodations that I then had, by that point, gotten cleared by a neurologist and had been treated for, and it was mostly under control. But, with any chronic illness, you have kind of days of breakthrough. And so because of the university's first unreasonable stance for remote work, and second, unreasonable and illegal, frankly, refusal to accept reasonable disability accommodations, I had to choose between my health and my job. And of course, I'm, chose my health, to my detriment financially. But, it had to be done. And ultimately, I'm glad I did it. But it was a reminder, honestly, what I went through in the year and a half after that everybody is just one illness or tragedy or accident or whatever away from, losing everything, which I basically did. And I'm still building it back. But, it's just that reminder that none of us are invincible. And regardless of what kind of position you're in life, things happen, and, you have to deal with them, and there's just no way around it.
Yeah, it's pretty sobering when you realize that the majority of people will have a disabling event in their life. And so it's really hard to empathize with things like chronic illness or chronic pain and stuff like that, or critical illness, even if you haven't experienced it for yourself. And it's difficult to empathize because it means you're facing your own mortality, which is difficult for so many people to just kind of step back and understand that, especially with the chronic conditions and stuff like that, this is an everyday occurrence, and that many of them are not constant. They're intermittent. And so you can't predict what's going to be a good day or a bad day, or even what's going to be a good hour or a bad hour. Like, I was just recently recording with somebody else on this podcast and had to stop the episode because I was starting to pass out when I was recording. And so I had to chop that in 2 pieces, and I'm going to finish recording with them tomorrow. But it was scary. So I'm just really lucky that people have been super flexible about rescheduling things and stuff like that. But yeah, especially in the job market, it's hard to find something that is going to go with reasonable accommodations, even though legally they're supposed to.
Yeah. And, I think another thing about chronic illness is that, you don't have to be able to see it for it to be a disability, for it to completely
Absolutely
derail your life. I mean, nobody can see when I'm having these, attacks of dizziness or vertigo. But, if I get up and start walking, you can probably tell something's wrong. But, I think there's just kind of this misconception that people should, be able to see, like you should have to be in a wheelchair or be using a cane or whatever it is. But that's just not the case.
Yeah. So how has your experience with chronic illness informed how you're approaching your platform for policy?
So I think having both the chronic illness and being a healthcare provider has given me kind of a unique perspective with everything that's going on in the country with this big BS bill, especially with, Medicaid and Medicare and how it's going to impact them. There's a lot of people who have chronic illness who depend on Medicaid. And one of the big things that they've written into this bill is work requirements.
Mm.
for Medicaid. And I don't know specifically what those are going to be, but I am absolutely sure that they're going to make them as difficult to meet as possible to get that exemption.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have people in Congress who are making these bills who don't have a medical background and who don't know what it really takes to deal with some of these chronic illnesses. Like, let's just take like kidney disease, for example. If somebody is on dialysis, a lot of times they're having to physically go to dialysis 3 times a week and sit in a chair for 3 or 4 hours a day. And it's pretty hard to hold a full-time job when you're in that situation.
Yeah, let alone the toll that it takes on your body and your mind, for that matter.
Yeah. And I mean, even after you're done with dialysis for the day, a lot of those people are really tired after dialysis. And so being able to work even after that in the day is really difficult. And so a lot of those people depend on Medicaid to pay for their health care. And it worries me that they're going to be seen as people who are able to help hold a full-time job. And that, for so many of them, is just not the case. So when it comes to my ideas on policy, ultimately, I mean, I think when we finally flip the House, we have to get back in there and we have to repeal all of this mess that they have put into effect. Now, fortunately, a lot of this is not going to go into effect until about 2026, which is actually a good thing and a bad thing. A good thing because we have some time, and a bad thing because they deliberately did this so that it would look like the Democrats are the ones that are taking their health care away, because we are expected to flip the House. And so by the time all of this happens, it's going to, hopefully the Democrats are going to be back in charge. So we've got to figure out how to get in there and make some changes really right away upon our new Congress that'll start in 2027. And one of those things has got to be immediately, how do we fix this mess with all the money that they're taking away from Medicaid and all the new requirements that they're putting on these people?
Yeah, absolutely. And how do we proceed in fixing everything that's been broken or has the potential to break in terms of like timing with all of that stuff?
That's something I've been worrying about. It's going to take a long time to repair all of the damage that has been done in just 7 months. I don't think a lot of it is going to be fixed in my lifetime. There is just so much that has been destroyed, so much progress that has been rolled back. And, it's going to take a large group of really dedicated Democrats, not only to get us elected back into the House in power, but to get everything put back to where it needs to be. And the other part that worries me is that not only do we have to get the power back in the Democrats' hands, but we have to keep it once it's there. So if we lose it again in 2028, we are back at square one. And so we have to make sure that the public really understands what is going on, what they're in for, and what we will lose again if we don't, unfortunately keep the Congress in the Democrats' hands.
Yeah. Speaking of, how are you approaching voters who have, for lack of a better term, historically voted against their own interests, especially in regard to the Medicare cuts?
So I think one thing that is good is that a lot of people are kind of starting to wake up to the fact that maybe what they've been voting for isn't what they thought they were going to get. So I think that is good. But as far as for everyone else who isn't yet seeing it, I think it's going to be a long year of trying to figure out the best way to educate these people. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, they're not going to change their minds until it happens to them. And waiting for it to happen to them, first of all, it's a terrible thing to have to happen to you. But second of all, waiting doesn't give us a lot of time when we have an election coming up in, a little over a year. So, we've got to get people who are already being affected by these. If anybody is being affected by these cuts already, we need your voices. We need your voices and we need your help to get out to these people who haven't yet seen for themselves how it's going to impact them. And, we're going to need their help to educate these people. So that's kind of what I'm really calling for.
That's awesome. And I know it's a challenge, but I've been seeing friends kind of starting to come out of the woodwork and go, like, my disability is disappearing because of all of the federal employees that are suddenly gone who can't process my disability stuff anymore. And the Social Security stuff is much harder to navigate now because there's so many fewer employees. And so even without the big bill having gone through everything and taking it apart brick by brick, the amount of federal employees that have gone from the system has made the system nearly impossible to deal with in the first place. And I know the courts have been trying their best to try to reverse as much of that as they can. But what does that look like in terms of trying to get the infrastructure of the government even back in shape?
So, we have to get in there and figure out exactly what has been done, because I think one of the bad things, many bad things that Doge did, but one of the bad things that has happened is they did so much firing and chopping up of things so rapidly that I don't even think the people in the government at the moment know the full extent of what is now missing. And it's not like it was in a good place to begin with before they even came in. I mean, when I had my issue with the disability thing, one of the reasons that I did not pursue it legally was because you had to wait to see somebody who was with the ADA to even get permission to sue. So
Good
it
Lord.
was, it was like a 6 to 8 month wait just to see that person.
Wow.
And if you got permission to sue, then of course you had to come up with the money for a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just nearly impossible to do. And so that's why I ended up not pursuing it. But those problems that we had before this started are horribly magnified now. I mean, another example of this is student loans. Student loans, were kind of on hold during the whole COVID thing. And then it was like, well, I think some of them are going to get forgiven. And then they were kind of trying to figure out, well, when do we restart payments and all of this? And now the current state is that they are messing with the income-based repayment plans and telling people that they're not eligible for the ones they thought they were going to be eligible for. And a lot of these new plans they're trying to put people on, people can't afford them. So you've got all these student loans defaulting. And I mean, forget trying to get somebody on the phone to help you with that. That wasn't happening before. It's definitely not happening now, especially since they're trying to dismantle the Department of Education. So, I mean, I will concede that there has always been an efficiency problem with the government. Anything related to the government has an efficiency problem, always has. And so, yes, that has always needed to be fixed, but not at the expense of government employees and the people who depend on these programs who now have zero hope of ever getting anything cleared up.
What is your feeling on the debate between the full privatization and full government-based healthcare systems for our country?
I think if we had universal healthcare in this country, a lot of our problems would immediately be made better. Problem is getting to universal healthcare because we have so many corporate interests that are in healthcare today. I mean, you can't drive down the road without seeing a hospital that's owned by some big corporation that also owns 5 or 6 other hospitals.
Not to mention all the urgent cares.
And the urgent cares. And, try to find a private practice for primary care that is not owned by some big corporation.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that primary care is expensive. It's just like any other business. It's expensive to operate. You have to have staff, you have to have equipment, you have to have space, and you have, doctors that people think make a ton of money, but so much of their money goes to paying for all of these things, paying their staff, paying their rent, paying all of these things. And it becomes completely financially unsustainable. And so that's why all of these private practices end up selling to these big corporate entities, is because that's the only way they can survive. And so, unfortunately, because of all these corporate interests, getting healthcare or universal healthcare is going to be so difficult because you have insurance companies that are going to intervene because they're not going to want to lose all their business. You have big corporate entities that are going to intervene because they don't want to lose all their business. It's funny how a lot of them, say they're a nonprofit, and I guess by some technicality, maybe they are a nonprofit, but their CEOs still get big bonuses. They still, make a ton of money. So the nonprofit status is kind of misleading for a lot of these things. But I think we have to if we're going to go for universal healthcare, we have to do it a piece at a time. And it just kind of goes back to the whole, we have to be able to keep the House and the Senate in order to do that. We can't do this in 2 years. It's going to take a long time. So that's just another reason why we have to make sure that Democrats have their stuff together and can get this back and keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you'd like, I'd love to just kind of go through, like, if you've got some bullet points about your platform that you'd like to cover.
Yeah. So obviously we've been talking about healthcare, so I'll just, go through that quickly. Healthcare, we need to not only expand access and make sure everybody can pay for it, which I think has been the focus of healthcare reform so far in this country, but we also need to make sure that our healthcare providers are protected and supported because they are not and have not been for a long time. It needs to be a priority of whatever legislation we put together that healthcare providers cannot be prosecuted for providing needed treatment to patients. And there's also a lot of burnout, a lot of mental illness, a lot of stress that comes along with working in healthcare, regardless of what kind of healthcare worker you are. I'm not just talking about doctors, nurses, PAs. I'm talking about, lab techs and CNAs and phlebotomists and anybody who works in healthcare. And so there needs to be some kind of support for that because what's happening is people are getting into healthcare and they're staying a couple of years and they're leaving. And it's just decimating our workforce. So those things are really important to me. Also, women's health, the whole abortion debate. Abortion is healthcare, period, end of story. That whole thing needs to be put to bed and needs to be put to bed in a very decisive way that abortion can be provided. It doesn't matter, what the situation is. Just to dispel a couple of myths that the other side likes to use, late-term abortion does not exist. It flat out does not exist.
Thank you.
No healthcare provider would ever even think about doing that. That is a tool that is used by pro-lifers to scare everybody. And we have to also make sure that women can access basic health care. So birth control, pap smears, mammograms. One of the things that has been really detrimental to that is the defunding of Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood has to be fully funded, and we have to support that fully. So those are kind of my things on healthcare. Education. I'm a Pell Grant kid. I went to undergrad on a Pell Grant because my parents could not afford to send me to college. And Pell Grants, along with student loans, are at risk. We have to make sure that we are fully funding those things because the only way out of a lot of situations for kids in poverty is to get education. And so that is one big thing. We also have to make sure that we are directing funds to public education and not providing public funds for private schools. Look, if you want to send your kid to private school, that's fine. That's great. Please pay for it, not with public funds. So those are a couple of things with education that I am passionate about. Disability, we talked about disability already, making sure that disability rights are supported, that those with disabilities can get the health care that they need, can get the extra help that they need. Sorry, my dog is having a fit.
That's okay.
And making sure that disability accommodations are being met and respected because people with disabilities are still perfectly capable of doing work and contributing. They just may need to have a little bit of help doing so. And, just kind of ending the whole nightmare that we're going through right now in this country. At some point, this is going to end. It sure seems bleak at times that it, may be a long time. And sometimes I think, is this ever going to end? But it will. And when we get there, we have to put protections in place to make sure this kind of thing never happens again. I think the lower courts have helped us out a lot, but Supreme Court has not been very helpful to us as far as allowing the president to be immune from everything. That has to stop. We need to expand the size of the Supreme Court. We need to make it less partisan and just reintroduce just some common sense and, back into our politics. Right now, it's just about one side fighting the other constantly. And it really doesn't even matter the topic, because one side is going to take a stance, the other side is going to take a different stance, and they're just going to fight each other, and nothing's ever going to get done. And that has to stop. And so in order to do that, we have to elect candidates that are going to make sure that that stops. And that might mean electing people who are not necessarily Republican or Democrat. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Democrat because I believe in the ideals that the Democratic Party stands for. But I also recognize that there's corruption on both sides. And anybody who tells you there's not corruption on the Democratic side is just not being honest, because I've seen it myself. And, we have to think about, is this two-party system really what is best for our country? Because it's gotten us in a heck of a mess right now.
Yeah.
And we have to think about, are there third parties that could help? Do we need to start supporting more independence? And we have to also be not afraid to call out corruption regardless of where it exists. I call out corruption on the Democratic side all the time. I do it way more on the Republican side because, frankly, there is more corruption on the Republican side. But I will call it out regardless of where it is. And if we don't have people that are willing to do that, then we're not going to get out of this mess.
In light of that, how do you feel about the sort of purity tests that have been going through the Democratic Party lately?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really hard to deal with that, especially as a candidate, because I think those of us who are in the Democratic Party largely have the best interests at heart. And specifically with, kind of like trans health and trans issues. Can we hold on just 1 minute? My dog has a freaking... She's got it up and she's chewing it up. And this is going to get loud.
Okay, I'll pause. Oh, you're fine. Mine get into all kinds of things when I'm not looking, and then I'll be like, how did you take apart my crochet project that quickly?
Yeah, mine, because I do telemedicine, and this one gets really jealous when I'm on the computer all day talking to people. So that's probably what she's doing right now, is trying to distract me. Anyway. Tell me that question again.
Oh, I was talking about the purity tests that happened with candidates, especially with the infighting on the Democratic side. The idea that the candidates all have to be absolutely perfect in every way, and you have to agree with absolutely everything they say or put into their platforms, whereas the other side doesn't seem to really have that problem. Mm-hmm. How do we overcome that roadblock so that we can actually make some progress?
Yeah, I mean, that's really difficult to deal with as a candidate. And as far as the purity tests go, we have to get past that. You're never going to agree with every single candidate 100% all the time. And I think on the Democratic side, for the most part, the candidates have the best interests of everybody at heart, while still recognizing that there are people, even on our side, who, are not completely on board with, all of the issues that perhaps we wish that they were on board with. And so as somebody who's running for office, you have to try to understand everybody's perspective and recognize that you're trying to be a representative of the people, even if they don't quite agree with what your stance is on things. Mm-hmm. And so it's partially a balancing act, but at the same time, I also think that there has to be some degree of courage and bravery. You have to be able to stand up for things that you do believe in and that you do think are the correct way to go. So specifically with, trans health, those people are people. They're humans. It's human rights.
Yeah.
And regardless, you don't have to understand it, to support them
Yes.
as humans.
Yeah.
I'm not trans, I'm not, LGBTQ, and so for me, I will never understand what it's like to be in that situation, but I do understand that when, I help out somebody who is transgender and they need gender affirming hormone therapy, and I tell them, yes, we can do this for you. Like, I know the relief I see on their face.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just can't fake that kind of stuff. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, while I may never be able to personally understand that, that doesn't stop me from being able to support them as a human being. And so, I think people just need to keep in mind that, your views may differ from other people, but ultimately, who's on the better side of history here?
Yeah.
And that's where we have to go.
I have been listening to the song from Hamilton a lot lately. The history has its eyes on you.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, it hits hard these days.
Yeah.
So, how has your chronic illness experience informed how you're approaching being a candidate?
I think the main thing that the chronic illness, taught me, like we kind of talked about before, is that, everybody is just one illness or injury or tragedy away from having everything turned on their head. And so I always try to think about that when I'm talking to people, in my district who are struggling or who can't find a job or who are having trouble keeping a job. That has kind of informed, my method of approaching people because, I am overemployed. I work too many jobs. So sometimes it can be difficult for me to remember that, there are people who are not as fortunate as me who, may have trouble finding a job or, making rent or, paying their bills. And so that's kind of one of the things that informs, my conversations with people. We are forgetting that there are a large number of those people out there. And it's to the detriment of our society, really, when we disregard those people and just focus on the people who are making it. So,
Yeah,
mhm.
absolutely. Were there any times in your health experience that you felt that you experienced gender bias,
Oh, for sure.
either as a professional or as a patient?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, for sure. I think as a female, a lot of times we just have to fight harder to make sure that we're heard because female patients, and I mean, this is proven, there's data to support this. Female patients, a lot of times, are not taken seriously when they talk about their symptoms. A lot of times, their symptoms get chalked up to anxiety or stress or something similar. And a lot of times, it's not that. Like with me, you definitely could have chalked up migraines to anxiety and stress, but it turns out it was due to something else. And, as healthcare providers, we have to make sure that we're searching every possible avenue for, is this really something that's being caused by a disease process, or could it be caused by stress and anxiety? Because stress and anxiety are real. They can cause bad symptoms. But we don't do anybody a service whenever we chalk everything up to anxiety and stress. And not only that, but how many times do men get their symptoms blamed on anxiety and stress? It just doesn't happen nearly as often.
And they get pain medication the first time they ask.
Yeah, and they get pain medication. And, it's honestly shocking, because I've been in emergency medicine for a long time. Honestly, women tend to handle their pain better than men. And I don't know if it's just because they are used to having to ask more for pain medication and men just are used to getting it whenever they want. I don't know if that's the case, but both as healthcare provider and as a patient, you have to be aware that there is gender bias in healthcare for sure. And it's something that I think that we are increasingly more aware of, which is a good thing, but it's certainly not something that is fixed by any means.
Yeah. Talking about the gender affirming care, though, and menopause, I was just going to say, even if somebody absolutely cannot, for some reason, empathize with giving healthcare of gender affirming care to transgender people. Like, it's such a slippery slope to taking away hormone replacement therapy for menopause for people who have menopause symptoms.
Yeah.
So, like, as much as we want to say, like, oh, it's not going to affect me, you're next.
Yeah.
Like, you're absolutely next. And the piece of people who have PCOS, like, how long is it before the birth control's gone?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's all a slippery slope to attacking the people who have been most marginalized in terms of healthcare in this country. So, I think it's super important that we protect the most vulnerable of us, because they're going to come for the rest of us next. But also because everybody deserves to have the dignity of their humanity and their healthcare provided in a reasonable manner, no matter who they are or where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, abortion and gender affirming hormone therapy, the only reason those things are issues is because those were the two things that pro-lifers and people who are against trans people could get their claws into and create a wide variety or a wide swath of people who are outraged by them. You know, abortion was first. The reason that, you know, Dobbs went down, and there's a whole history about this. You know, if you haven't seen the documentary Bad Faith, you really need to watch that documentary. It's something that everybody needs to see, because it will blow your mind how long they have been planning this stuff. I mean, since the 70s. And how much the Heritage Foundation has basically ruined so many people's lives and continues to ruin them.
To me, it kind of blows my mind how many people don't know that that's been going on for so long, and that it's so entrenched in our culture.
Yeah. And they planned all this for so long, and the reason that it didn't come out until the last decade or so is because they could never find enough politicians to sink their teeth into and make it happen. And then when Donald Trump showed up, he is just stupid enough and gullible enough and willing to lie enough that they were able to do it. You know, had we had somebody, I mean, this doesn't age well, but like Marco Rubio, had Marco Rubio beat him for that nomination, this probably would have never happened. And certainly Marco Rubio wouldn't be the sellout that he is now. But, you know, you think back to all of these things, like if he just hadn't won that first term, how different all of our lives would be now. And so it was never about abortion. It was about, they used abortion because it was an issue they could get a lot of people outraged about. It's still not about abortion. It's about control. It was never about gender affirming hormone therapy. Again, another thing that they use so that they can get everybody outraged about something, because it is something that so many people don't understand.
Yeah.
And people fear what they don't understand. And fear turns into outrage. And, you know, it's easy to look at transgender people and say, well, they're the reason that, you know, your kids are being sexually assaulted, or they're kidnapping your kids in bathrooms, and they're doing all of this stuff to like make them want to change their gender in school. And none of that is happening. I mean, if you really look at the people who are being arrested for these sorts of crimes, first of all, half of them are in politics. And the rest of them, I mean, by and large, are white Republican men. And that just, unfortunately, is the fact of the matter. You know, you don't see transgender people committing these crimes because they're just trying to be themselves.
Yeah.
So
they're just trying to live their lives as themselves. That's really it.
Yeah.
I was telling my husband the other day that I want to be the Mr. Rogers that I want to see in the world. So I have to ask, what is giving you hope right now in terms of the future of our government and our country?
Well, several things. I think a lot of people are starting to wake up to, first of all, what they voted for isn't what they're getting. I do see a lot of that happening. I wish it would happen a little bit faster, but, you know, it's happening and we'll take it wherever we can get it. I see a lot of people who previously might not have been involved getting involved. people who have never even thought about politics before now all of a sudden are taking an interest, and that's good to see. And, just people are starting to form community again, which has been something that I think has been missing in our society for a long time. And so we now have, people who are just kind of starting to reach out to each other in person again. And, that's been nice to see. And I do think that even though I do have my issues with the Democratic Party, it is nice to see them jumping up and starting to fight again, like with the Texas thing. I'm originally from Texas, so I am cheering those people on. Because Governor Greg Abbott is one of my least favorite people on the entire planet, and anytime he's mad is a good day for me. So, and so I'm really glad to see that there are parts of the Democratic Party that are really starting to stand up and fight back. And that gives me hope for, maybe we can turn this thing around after all.
Yeah, for me, a lot of it has been popular media lately, especially now that people like Stephen Colbert really have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So, and it's been interesting seeing that too in our political system, where like people like Tom Tillis of all people is like, well, I've got nothing to lose now, so I guess I'm just going to do whatever I want now. Yeah. And that means going against Trump for once. Like, whoever thought I'd be agreeing with Tom Tillis on things?
Well, I mean, not only just him, but freaking like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, I thought it would be
what the heck?
A cold day in hell before I would ever agree with a single word that came out of her mouth. And now she's just like, I don't like anything the Republican Party is doing. And I'm like, who are you? And
I saw a post by Laura Loomer the other day that I agreed with, and I was like, what world are we living in right now? This is just so weird.
Yeah.
But to tell the truth, I actually put an entry in Urban Dictionary for Tom Tillis once because when he was running years ago, he mentioned something about not washing his hands after he used the restroom. So there is still, to this day, a definition on Urban Dictionary called tillising, and it is not washing one's hands after using the restroom. So just a fun little tidbit there.
But, I mean, it's funny you mentioned the whole, like, politics and not being afraid to say anything because, I mean, I think even just 5 or 6 years ago, if we ever heard, like, the F-bomb come out of a politician's mouth, I mean, everybody would just be clutching their pearls, like, mm-hmm. And now it's just, it's just another day. It's just another Tuesday. And, I mean, it just reflects the outrage that we're all feeling. I mean, me specifically in my race, I'm in a very gerrymandered red district that literally nobody thinks I can win, including the Democratic Party. And that's why I'm getting almost no help other than from volunteers, which I do greatly appreciate. But one of the pluses to that is that I can say anything, and it's not going to hurt me because I was already down.
Right.
So, I mean, I can say exactly what I think and not have to think about how I'm saying it. And I can, do things that maybe other politicians wouldn't do because they'd be too scared of how it was going to affect their votes.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I'm already a serious underdog.
Yeah.
And that is a really freeing thing. Like, running for office, especially at the congressional level, is just, it can be a very soul-sucking endeavor. And just the idea that, I can actually make this fun and enjoyable as opposed to having to fit into a little box every day for the next year and a half makes it so much easier to deal with.
Yeah, I bet. So, speaking of volunteers, what can people who want to support you do to support you in this race, or people like you in terms of like being in places that are super gerrymandered or being in sort of the really deep underdog situation? How can we lift you up?
So specifically for mine, if you go to my website, ashleybellforcongress.com, There is a sign up for volunteers there. Just, give me your name and your email, and I will let you know where you can help out. Donations are always extremely accepted. Unfortunately, the reality of the politics that we're in right now is we do have to raise money because this is expensive. There's no two ways around it. And there's also a donation link on my website. So any amount you can give, $5-10, even that helps. That is something that would be greatly appreciated. I think, just in general, people who are running in races like me, like I am, really just, appreciate support. I go to events all the time, and within the first 5 minutes of me getting to an event, usually somebody's coming up to me asking, why am I running when it's a lost cause? And this is terrible. This is horrible. This is bad. Why are you doing this? And it's just like, because we have to. We don't have a choice. We can't just sit around and let the status quo happen. We can't just sit around and let these fascists take our country. And so when you're going up to a candidate who is literally putting their entire life on hold for a year and a half, trust me, they know the reality. They know the reality of the situation they're in. And one of the last things they need to hear is somebody on their side belittling them for what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
And that honestly is one of the things that I struggle with the most, because I enjoy going out and hearing from the constituents and talking to people about what their issues are and all of that. But it's always getting past that first 10 or 15 minutes, like people just being like, do you even know what you're doing? Like, have you even looked into really what you're in? I mean, it's just like, no, I just fell off the turnip truck yesterday.
You need to get you one of those shirts that says like Alice's list of impossible things or something like that to say like, I know it's impossible. I'm doing it anyway. Like,
exactly.
It's not impossible, but it has to be done.
Yeah.
Something like that. That would be a good slogan. Something of that nature. Another question that I had, just for me personally, is like, what can people who are dealing with disabilities do to help in politics right now, especially like if you're not able to knock on doors and things like that, or if you are, say, on disability and you're not able to donate? What are some little things that we can do to help?
So one of the things you can do is help with phone banking. There are lots of things you can do on the phone. I mean, granted, a lot of phone activities end up with getting either hung up on or a voicemail. However, not all of them do. And we have a specific situation in North Carolina right now where we have a bunch of people whose voter registration is going to be challenged if it's not fixed. And those names are published with the North Carolina Board of Elections. You can go online and find out if you're on the list, but we are going to be organizing people to call every single one of those people. In the 10th district, my district, I think there are somewhere around like 70,000 that we have to call. It's a lot. But we have to call and make sure that those people get their voter registration fixed so we don't have the same issue that we had with Allison Riggs earlier this year, to where we had a 6-month-long dragged out process to get her in the seat that she rightfully earned. Because, again, Republicans were trying to cheat her out of it. So that is one thing that they can do. Also, anybody who's got, a disability or knows about Medicaid or knows somebody who's affected by these things, again, we just need your voice. Like, we need your voice on things like this, like podcasts, interviews. I'm actually going to be starting a Substack where I talk to people about, things like this. We need you to volunteer just to kind of speak up, because your voices do count. And again, if people don't have these difficulties, they don't see what the problem is until, unfortunately, it happens for them. And they need to see it right in front of their faces.
Yeah, absolutely. My personal favorite is writing the postcards. I just absolutely love writing postcards for things. So I like decorating them with stickers and things too. It's just so fun. And it's something that I can do, when I have good moments throughout the day, which is nice. So is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think this has been great. I would just say that, for everybody who's listening, just, keep the faith, keep the hope, and Again, like I said earlier, this will end. Sometimes seems like it's going to be a long way off, but we're not giving up, and you shouldn't either.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Abiding Hysteria. If this conversation has inspired you to tell your healthcare story, please reach out on social media at Abiding Hysteria or email me at abidinghysteria@gmail.com. If you'd like to support our efforts to tell these healthcare stories, become a patron today for only $5 a month. You'll get access to completely uncut episodes a week before the cut versions are released everywhere else, as well as bonus content as it becomes available. Our next episode will release on the first Tuesday of October, so be sure to follow us at Abiding Hysteria or check out abidinghysteria.com to find out when it drops on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Please be sure to rate, review, comment, and share so that others can find us as well. It genuinely helps us out and will help the show keep going. Remember, when it comes to your healthcare, you deserve to be heard, understood, and most of all, believed.